People born into rich families but now live in the middle lower class. What happened? Story 1. My mom has about 2M in assets. When she passes I will be getting most of it. Until then I'll be working my middle class job making a middle class income. I'd rather have a mom than the 2M. Story 2. My parents were never really rich, but they did live like it for a while. I don't have the whole story but more or less. My dad had worked for the same large oil company for nearly 20 years. Head started at the very bottom, but ended up marrying my mother. My mother's father had worked at the same oil company for, I don't even know how long. Since the 50s, I guess. Anyway, my dad was doing well, distinguishing himself, getting promotions. He wasn't executive level, but he got into middle management. My mom wasn't used to living a middle-class lifestyle, I guess. She was used to being spoiled by my grandfather, who was an amazingly wonderful person, and never understood the negative effects his treating her like a child into her 40s had. So, my folks ended up supplementing my dad's income with money from my grandfather, basically. We lived in a snooty neighborhood, we had decent cars, trip to Disney every summer, etc., etc., all because when my mom said, "This is what I want," then that's what she got. Whether it was financially realistic for their situation or not, my grandfather retired in the mid-80s. So he's now on a fixed income and he locks his money up in trusts and so forth, planning for when he dies, so there's not so much money to be able to borrow now, but that's cool, right? 'Cause surely my dad will continue getting promotions until, oh yeah, no, he gets laid off around 1992, instead. My grandfather, as cancer is starting to reach his brain, is literally unable to understand that this has happened, thinking that his company would never do that. So, my dad is unemployed for 19 months, my grandfather passes, my mother, she continues on like nothing has changed. Trips to this tourist spot, trips to that tourist spot, jewelry, camps for me in the summer, new cars, blah blah blah. She blows through all the money her dad left her, blows through all the money he left my sister, and he didn't do a super job of securing it, thinking he could trust her, you see, and then my dad finally gets a job to get us back on our feet, but we still are only, actually middle class, and that's it really. She just kept driving us into the ground from there. We've all been dirt poor since then, more or less. Took a few years and the inevitable divorce, if you didn't see that coming, to really kill off the existing assets, but they're all gone now and have been for years. Meanwhile my mother is still drowning in credit card debt, while at least myself, my sister and my father all just live check to check. When she learned that none of us had any debt not too long ago, she actually said, You mean it was me," about having destroyed any upward mobility our family financially had. I'm very grateful for the abundance of stuff I had as a child, but I'm also very grateful that I'm not totally blinded by possessions like my mother. TLDR, narcissists really shouldn't procreate. Story 3. So, long story here, but I'll give it a go. My parents actually weren't very rich when I was born, but when I got into high school 2002-ish, that was a different story. My dad was running a hedge fund and it was doing really freaking well. So well, that the summer between my sophomore and junior year my dad had decided to buy a private jet. That was the coolest freaking thing ever. We would fly to Cali, then to Orlando, then stop in Dallas for lunch on the way home. We would go see college football games on the road. We remodeled our house and had an indoor pool. It was the life. Well, ignorance was bliss. Basically my dad had been running a semi-Ponzi scheme. Not to the level of a Bernie Madoff, but still in the $25 million range. The state came in and froze all of our family assets halfway between my junior year. We went from riches to rags. We were a pretty close family, and my con-like father had us believing that he was innocent and he would be exonerated of everything. During the next year my dad had only been charged civilly at that point in time, and we were still surviving probably off other stolen money. It was literally the last day of my senior year in 2006 when he was arrested and charged criminally. I remember bawling like a baby because I knew things were about to change. While he was in jail for 70 days waiting to find someone who was willing to bond him out, we didn't have enough money. My mom found out a ton of stuff about my dad that he had been lying about for years. Well, during that time my mom decided to leave my dad, and she wouldn't tell us why. She didn't want us kids to turn against him. That really pissed me and my 2 younger sisters off, and we actually kind of shunned my mom for a while, until we found out things for ourselves. To my mom's credit, she took the bullet for a while to avoid manipulating us. I really respect her for that. Now anyways, when my dad was out on bail he moved in with his parents, and so did I, and my mom moved in with my sisters into a small town home. I was enrolled to go to a pretty big college, but we didn't have the money, so I pulled out and stayed at a smaller school close to home while I was living with my dad and his parents. Everything I had dreamed of was taken away, my whole 18-year-old life in ruins. Well, I had begun to find out some things about my dad and I moved out on my own, got a job and started living my own life in April of 07. My dad delayed every court date he possibly could, and after finally pleading out he was set to be sentenced in September of 2008. Keep in mind he was initially arrested in May of 06. He was sentenced to 24 years in prison. Well, I was going to be a junior that year, but I knew that year might be crazy, so I actually took the year off. Great decision. I had to sort through all of the things he left behind. After sorting through his life, I found that for the last 2 years while he was out on bond, he had been stealing money under another alias, telling people he was a forex trader. In my estimation he stole another $750,000 in that time. I have no idea where the money went or what he did with it. I'm guessing he lost most of it trading in the forex so that he could repay his debt. I told the authorities, and he actually got charged, and amazingly enough he only got 4 more years tacked onto his sentence. I ended up transferring to a bigger university, and I am now the sports director for a small radio station. However, I am truly thankful for everything that happened. Seriously, I am. I learned what kind of man I wanted to be, what things gave me value in life, and through all of this I am closer with my mom and 2 sisters than I ever would have been. No amount of money will ever make you happy or solve any of your issues in life. I obviously left out a lot of details, but if you have any questions, ask away. P.S. Sorry for all the bad grammar, I just whipped this out at work. Story 4. My family's business went belly up in the downturn. My wife also had a business with her mom and sister. They figured out that they could have more money if they fired her, so they did. One day a letter came from a courier that said they had changed the locks and cancelled her work CC and phone. This all happened to us in the same year. Went from making $200,000 a year to now making $50,000. Wasn't very fun. Learned a lot about ourselves and the way the world works. Although I don't know what I did wrong, I do still believe in karma, and know it will work out okay. Story 5. My parents gave me a full ride to college and set me free. I married a girl who works seasonally, so we live paycheck to paycheck. We are both happy with life, but money is always an issue. Story 6. Not really on subject, but an ancestor of mine was quite high up in Bell Telecom and was offered a third of the company. He declined, saying that the telephone would come to little and it was just a stupid invention, and that, folks, is why I'm middle class. Story 7. My father was a real estate agent here in California. The market crashed and he lost all his homes. Now he's about $50 million in debt. Edit accidentally put $5 billion. It is actually $50 million. Story 8. Great-grandfather was worth a couple $100 million back in the late 70s. Went to MIT after being a submarine navigator during World War II on the GI Bill. After graduating, he quit his engineering job to take over the family plumbing business and take care of his sick father. Turned out that was perfect timing because air conditioning started to become a thing. So being smart, he basically forged a small fortune installing air conditioners for large businesses that turned into hotel investments, and I have pics of him partying with the Hilton's Paris grandparents. Great-grandmother actually played bridge with a lot of old famous women, even with one of the first ladies, forget which one off the top of my head. He went heavily into oil in the mid-70s though, and when the OPEC embargo lifted he couldn't recoup his costs and had to file bankruptcy. Through some loopholes he was able to keep a couple million, 2 hotels, and a couple other things. He passed away worth about $5 to $6 million in liquid assets. His son made a lot of money by off investments moved into his name from when my great-grandfather went broke. Never had this readily explained, think some were already in his name, but he just sold his portion to his son or something like that. So supposedly my grandfather is worth 30 to 50 million almost exclusively from riding his coattails and being co-slumlord with a friend of his that buy lots of real estate. He was an inspiration to me, but after my grandfather we are all working stiffs now. I'm the first person to get a college education since my great-grandfather, even though my mom has like 6 half-sisters because other people always worked at the family hotels. Mother was pretty much removed from the family because she married my dad, who is an asshat on his best day. But he's a smart 2-faced hat, so he is now the head spokesperson for a major company in Oklahoma. He came from nothing and married for money, but when he found my mom was connected to money without access, pretty sure he got rid of her. I was pretty much his anchor baby. I'm probably the second richest in my family now, but there is a big gap between my grandfather and me. I'm only 26. My goal is to make it big without losing it like my grandfather did, ironically doing it with oil field investments, but purposefully trying not to extend myself too thin. I was given probably about $60K total from my family, of which my dad stole $40K because I was young and naive, kept it in my savings account my grandmother created to save for college. Rest went to the down payment of my house. Story 9. My family owned a large proportion of the southwest UK. When one generation of go-getters died, the next generation couldn't be arsed with all that stress and work, and handed the financial responsibility to bankers and lawyers who 1. Invested heavily in the railways, 2 months before it was nationalized. 2. Invested heavily in Germany right before WW2. Particularly in booming medium-sized industrial companies based in the Ruhr. 3. Stole a not inconsiderable amount of money themselves. Then they retired, handing the family back less than 5 of the original capital land. Only a few acres remain, thanks to several generations of bad management and death duty. Story 10. Parents lost everything twice. Life savings wiped out when the bank they had their savings in collapsed overnight. Dad rebuilt everything from scratch only to have corrupt swindlers who bought the company he was the GM of fire him and freeze assets when he refused to help them launder money. They seized everything. I was 17 when we were thrown out of our house. He sued, but the case took 10 years to resolve. The settlement was halved by the judge for an inexplicable reason after their last appeal failed, which was just enough to cover their debts for 10 years. My dad is a broken man. Depression lead to dementia, and he doesn't even know when it's day or night. My brother, sister, and I have been supporting them for the last 10 years. Everything Eve built has been with no support other than my own head and hands, and I live in perpetual fear that it could disappear overnight. Story 11. My life fell apart and they didn't care, so we became estranged. Then I found out they were telling people it was because I was angry at them for not giving me enough money. I don't hate them or anything, but I basically quit the family in disgust. I never asked for or expected money from them. All I wanted was for them to actually care about me. Story 12. Ugh me, my dad left my family about $2 million from life insurance. I up royally. I got into pills. I went crazy with my inheritance. I'm ashamed of all of it, both my mom and myself are barely scraping by with what little is left, which is basically nothing. We all lost everything, completely my fault. I met someone from England, my mom flew him down here, he mooched, he got deported. My last ex mooched until we had nothing but the guitars my dad bought me before he died, and my ex hawked them all while I was trying to save face. I dropped out of 2 colleges. I'm just the worst ever. Story 13. My mother wasn't rich per se, but doing extremely well for herself. Then she married my father and it all went to. A few years later after I'm born and I'm older, we're living in Oregon and mom is busting her, and we were living comfortably at the middle high range and we're pretty. 911 happens. Mom's laid off, and ever since both parents were working jobs. Hey, race the kicker. Dad was making bank working for McDonnell Douglas until he got laid off. He has all that experience and pretty much refuses to do anything with it. Now they're wholly depending on me renting a room from them so they can make rent each month. Most of my life's been in poverty. My mother is disabled now and has given up on my dad actually doing anything to help the family out. He's never really worked any actual job since he's met my mother. He now valets at a hospital. Granted, it's full-time. Money's not there. I'm striving to not let myself end up like that, and am settling into a nice career assembling medical devices. Story 14. My father helped design the X-15 for Boeing and the USAF and also designed the robots that tested the spacesuits for the Gemini and Mercury space programs. We had a beautiful house at the top of Los Altos Hills in Palo Alto and were considered pretty well off. My dad's accountant stole all the money in the late 70s and we ended up penniless. We never fully recovered. Although he continued to invent products, nothing was so grandiose as his aerospace days. When he died in '86, we were almost penniless and everything we had left was auctioned off to pay for tax debts, and I lived with foster parents until I turned 18. Had I not had that happen, I probably would have been a spoiled little like those people I dislike today that grow up entitled and irresponsible. I'm 45 now and in the middle class working in a help desk. I love my job and my life. Everything we went through made me a better person. Story 15. Ill bite. My parents were very successful in the late 80s, early 90s. My dad had graduated as an econ major at a prestigious West Coast university, and my mom had moved out to the West Coast to start a new life. At the time, my dad had just bought a struggling company. Between he and my mom, they were able to turn it around, and soon they were making upwards of $500,000 a year, about $1.5 million in today's dollars. I was born in the early 90s. Between me and my sister, we had literally anything that we wanted. We lived right by the beach in a multi-million-dollar home, dressed in designer clothes, vacationed in exotic places, hung out at the country club. I was really too young to appreciate what we had though. My parents both had to travel pretty extensively, mostly to Asia. For work, my dad began cheating, doing drugs, and soon became a raging alcoholic. Just before I turned 4, my parents divorced. As a part of the settlement, my dad kept the company that they had worked so hard together building. My dad lost it. He continued his spiral into alcoholism, stopped caring about my sister and I, ruined the company, and became the definition of a deadbeat dad. On the other hand, my mom kept afloat. We kept our lifestyle up for a little while, however. Money doesn't last forever, and my dad did not pay 1 cent of child support. Eventually my mom found another job. This time though, she wasn't making nearly what she was before. She struggled to support us for a bit, and I'm sure she got very sick of my sister and I complaining about our lifestyle change. Eventually she was able to be promoted high enough to support us in the upper middle class. My dad is the opposite. He has been in and out of jail, has not had a steady job since the divorce, and has lost almost all of my respect. I think my sister and I are pretty successful though 18 years after the fact. She just graduated from law school almost debt-free with a big scholarship, and I just started my first year of grad school. Maybe I was too young to understand what had happened to us, but my mom made sure that everything worked out. Between moves and joblessness, my mom always made sure that we worked hard in school and stayed out of trouble. Looking back, it's weird how quickly everything happened. It was out of nowhere really. It's really hard to relate to something you haven't been through, but be cognizant of what can happen to your life. It can change incredibly quickly. Edit words. Story 16. I wouldn't consider my family rich when it happened, but we were well off. Well, when the whole market thing happened on 2008, that was the perfect time for me to go through a medical problem bonanza. I had low bone density, so it was easy for me to break my arms. From 2008 to 2009, I broke my arms 67 times because apparently I just didn't learn my lesson. The medical bills racked up and ate away at the savings that my single mother had. Then she lost her job and things spiraled. Without getting into too many details, she ended up doing odd jobs for money and we almost lost our home after pawning everything we owned. Every time I look back at there I can't help but think that it was my fault, and if I just slowed down and didn't do stupid stuff things would have been better off for my family. TLDR, I broke a lot of bones when the economy went to and basically led my family into debt. Story 17. My wife's family is rich. Think Texas oil field rich, private jet rich, not upper middle rich, but top 3%ers. These folks have money, and for some strange reason, the beautiful creature chose to marry me instead of one of the trust fund babies and lawyers' kids that were angling to ask her out. I come from a lower middle class family, and I have stayed in the lower middle class, and she has been very content, almost grateful to be away from a whole wealth scene. It has not been easy, and there have been times where we have dipped below the poverty line, but on the whole we have had enough food to eat, a roof over our heads, and clothes for the kids. which is more than most people in this world today, so we feel blessed. We haven't asked for help from her family much, and her parents feel that money should be earned, not inherited, so they haven't showered us in cash. They will fly us out for ski vacations or to Paris from time to time, but then we come back and hang out with our friends who are painters and dance instructors and mechanics and writers, and just live our normal workaday, enchanted lives, and teach our children to work hard and earn a living. And that's the American way, isn't it? Work hard, enjoy life, and give back more than you get. I wouldn't have it any other way. Edit by Rich. I mean this, they could stop working tomorrow and live in luxury for the rest of their lives. As I understand it, they bring 7 figures into the house every year just to do stuff with. But they are also buying companies and huge tracts of land and other stuff. I really don't even know how much money there is involved, as I have never been interested enough to find out. That just really does not motivate me. Her dad has been on CNN, got free tickets to the Olympics from the Chinese government, had a personal invitation to the Lord Mayor of London's big hoo-ha ceremony and sat in the box with her, all that kind of stuff. He was asked to serve as secretary of one of the departments under the current administration, but turned it down for political differences. Rich, top-tier folks, and quite frankly, I am happy for her family, but that does not motivate my wife and I. We intentionally drive beater cars, even when we have had better cars offered to us. We don't landscape our yard like in McMansion subdivisions. We shop at Goodwill on purpose. To keep ourselves grounded and to support people less fortunate than ourselves, we have already decided what to do with the inheritance when it comes, pay the taxes, and donate the rest. We already have the groups picked out to donate to. Quite frankly, I don't think my personal integrity could handle that kind of wealth, and I would end up getting stupid with it, so it is better for us to just live like we are. We've also got our kids to think about, and I want them to grow up working, not sitting around reeling in cash from a trust fund. Story 18. My mother's paternal grandmother was extremely well-to-do and talking friends with European royalty. She disowned my grandfather for marrying my of a grandmother. Story 19. My father was born into a very wealthy English family in the 1950s. Money had been passed down for 4 to 5 generations, so the family had status as well as wealth, very important in post-war Britain. There was a prosperous family business generating buckets of cash to fund their lavish lifestyles and trusts from previous generations to protect the inherited land wealth. My father was bred by his father, my grandfather, to fit into this world and along with his brother to one day take over the running of the business. They lived in a world of Rolls-Royces, chauffeurs, dinners with the political and social elite, all-around privilege. He never attended university. Instead, in his early 20s he assumed an executive position in the family business, straight in at the top. By now in the mid-1970s Britain was in dire economic trouble, but the business was solid and the money kept flowing. In 1979 I was born. I was raised in a 1,000-year-old 10-bedroom manor house in the Surrey countryside. I grew up with all the trappings of English privilege, land, horses, yachts, staff and a very pricey private education. Boarding school from the age of 7. During the 1980s my father pushed the family business for an IPO trade on the stock market, as was the Thatcherite fashion at the time. Soon after this the business was purchased by a German multinational for a massive premium, leaving my father and his family with very full pockets. Collectively well over $100 million. And this is where it all fell apart. The spending accelerated. The collection of classic Bentley and Rolls-Royces doubled. More yachting, more high socializing. I even remember having Margaret Thatcher at our house for a fundraiser when I was a child. But one thing my father had never learned in all these years of privilege was how to budget, how to invest. All his life, all his father's life, the money had never ever ended. Why would it now? Fairly quickly the pile started to dwindle. I was kept in private school, but by the mid-90s the selling started. The cars started to go, some of the smaller racing yachts went, then the house was up for sale. Divorce saw my mother move into a fairly average 5-bedroom house in suburbia, and my father moved to a smaller collection of houses. I have since pieced together that when father realized the money pile was diminishing he had rather rashly tried to invest it. He went on a buying spree, and a few unscrupulous agents, accountants and trustees had managed to get their hands in the till. The 90s recession took care of many his other investments. Exact figures are hard to piece together. Even as the everything was falling apart the appearances never faltered. The parties continued, the socializing, the dining, the yachting. By 2000 there was very little left. Actual cash had now gone, so my father turned to selling off the remaining assets and properties to keep the show going. Even as it was falling apart I remember him going on 50K holidays, and him paying for 10K dinners. I was at university by this point, and soon my allowance started to falter. After a privileged upbringing like my father, my circle was full of wealthy socialites. Eyebrows were raised when I couldn't keep up and the more shallow of my friends stared to give me a wide berth. I graduated in 2002. This is when, for the first time, I realized that my father was close to bankruptcy and I faced an unknown future. Many of you may be cheering at this point, as I'm sure hearing stories of excess and privilege make you sick, but for me it was a deeply dark time. Every time I attempted to speak to my father about my future, he shrugged it off, maintaining there was still millions in the pot. Plenty for me to do whatever I wanted in life. There wasn't. He had never had to consider his future growing up, and he had passed this fault on to me. Now it seemed I had no future. When the parties ended and the socialites shunned him I knew the game was truly up. He had spent the lot, mostly in trying to maintain his status as an established English gentleman. In 2007 he managed to scrape enough together to buy a small cottage in the country, and with some help worked out a budget that he still couldn't stick to. My world also changed. When the word was out that about my family the social elite slowly crept away. I worked a few jobs in London, but my name was tarnished and I always felt like a failure. I suffered from depression and retreated into drink. For a few years I had a wretched existence. It wasn't self-pity. I didn't feel I had failed in anything, but I had no place in society and no way of finding one. After the death of my grandfather who no longer spoke to my father due to the shame, I started to pick myself up. He left me a small inheritance. With it, I did what many British have done over the ages. I moved to Africa. The blight of my previous existence didn't reach here. I met my wife, I bought a farm. I now live happily as a colonial stereotype. I have taken on a very pragmatic view of the world that is more openly played out in Africa. Luck chance is by far the greatest deciding factor in our lives, yet no one seems to give it any bearing. We only have the smallest self-deception of control. Forgive, forget and move on. I still fairly regularly go to England to see my family and often get visits. My mother has met a new man and settled down well. My father still doesn't get it. The cottage is gone, yachts and cars have been bought and sold. Somehow he has staved off bankruptcy. But I know the taxman is on his case. Every few months I get urgent requests for money from him. Sometimes I help. I realize there will soon be nothing left. He's not a bad man. Like us all, just a product of his surroundings. He can always come and live with me under the African sun. TLDR, father's money could never run out. It ran out. I ran away to Africa. Story 20. Well, as a kid, I lived pretty well. My dad owned his own business and did well for himself. Nice cars, boats, vacations, and anything I wanted, and I never even asked. But then my mom left him. We did fine for a few years because he hid his pain with booze, parties, and 20-year-old girlfriends. Suddenly I don't know why all that stopped, and he fell into deep depression, and just literally stopped working. With no money coming in, we lost our home, most of my stuff, and we even had to give my dogs to our grandparents to take care of. After selling his nice car for extra cash, he bought a retired ice cream truck, and that is where I lived. Kids would run after my car expecting to get ice cream. It was hilarious. And as far as being homeless goes, the ice cream truck was as good as it gets. It even had a mattress in the back. For 3 months, we parked on Santa Monica Beach, and kind of hung out there. My dad stole food, and we had one McDonald's cup we would constantly refill. I didn't wash my clothes for months and showered in sinks, but honestly, there are worse ways to be homeless than to hang out in Santa Monica. Story 21. The recession in California hit us bad. Growing up, my family had always owned a flooring window covering store, and we were pretty well off. We had the big house, big backyard, blah blah blah. Well, in 2008 our business failed. Our house was foreclosed and we moved to Texas with almost nothing, living with my grandparents for a while, and my parents had to start over, from the ground up. Neither of them went to college, so they had nothing to fall back on, but my mother is now a retail manager and my father builds nature blinds. We're middle class and everything's great. Nowhere where we used to be, but we have a house full of food and love. I'm in college and pay my own rent and work 2 jobs. I'm only 19 all because of this experience, and to be honest, I guess you could say I'm grateful because of what it taught me, and it made my family stronger. Story 22. I was adopted by upper middle class parents. My mom passed away from cancer when I was 14, at which point my dad blew a good chunk of my inheritance college fund on drugs. I have a BA but still barely get by at this point. Not sure whether I will be able to afford to go to graduate school. Rest of my family is pretty much useless. Somehow, still with a robust criminal record, my dad now works for the state legislature. Story 23. Greek taxes. Before anyone comments that's what you get for not paying your taxes, the reason why Greek people did not pay taxes was because they could not. We had the highest VAT in the EU, the highest tax in energy for measurement in the UK. Energy from local sources was exempted from VAT. Tons of bureaucracy. Up to 50 tax on property that generates revenues. Renting a house. Import duties for products that arrived from other EU countries, which is illegal because of the EU trade agreement. 2 different types of tax on cars, one on gas and one to use the street. Every other Western nation chooses one or the other, ever since 2008. They have been pretty much introducing new words for new taxes. Pay a luxury tax if your family owns more than 1 car. God knows how many taxes on property. Meanwhile, electricity and water is a monopoly, but some would claim that they belong to the people, and you pay tons of money for electricity. A country that has sun pretty much every day should lead the way in the green energy revolution that has been taking place now. Instead, a northern European country is. Meanwhile, we import electricity from Albania and Skopje. My dad doctor had an affair with several patients and lost his license. Story 24. My father was an orthopedic surgeon. He did an amazing amount of pro bono work, so he isn't as rich as you would expect an orthopedic surgeon to be. But he has plenty of money. I'm in grad school right now, finishing a master's in biology, and I'm trying to handle it on my own. My parents do cover my car insurance and have kept my on the family cell phone plan, but I take care of the rest. For the first year or so of grad school, every time I talked to my dad he would offer to cover my tuition and rent for me, but I kept declining. I think he just wanted to help and to be sure I had a decent standard of living, but he didn't understand that I needed to support myself in order to feel like a man. Either my mom explained that to him or he just gave up, because he finally stopped offering to support me. So yeah, I'm pretty poor right now, but it's only temporary. I'll most likely never be very wealthy, but I should be able to net a pretty decent income once I'm done with school. Story 25. My parents were rich and are still rich. I'm very poor. I have around 100 to my name and spend about 5,000 a year. While my parents are rich, they honestly believe in their own minds that they are not. This perspective made for an odd childhood. For example, for years the TV had a broken and required pliers to change the channel. I was yelled at for eating too much yogurt because yogurt was expensive. I couldn't have Kraft macaroni cheese because it was too expensive. I had to have no-name brands. That's a bit strange given my parents honestly believed that while being multimillionaires, we lived poor while being rich. In stark contrast, my aunt and uncle lived rich while being poor. See post history. On the other side of that, they used their money. We went on a lot of vacations, cruises, etc. On average 5 separate trips, totally around 8 to 10 weeks a year, and that's just vacations that includes a flight. That excludes stuff like weekend trips or going to one of their 2 waterfront cottages for water skiing or whatever. The mentality was instilled into me to make do with something cheap because it's good enough, and to pick what to spend your money on. What happened is I went off to university. I lived in a really shitty apt because it was cheap. The things I did for fun were the things that stereotypical poor students did. Life was good. Living on my own with no money was so much better than living with my parents with money that it doesn't even compare. It made me realize I didn't need money as long as I didn't have expenses. What happened is I don't care about things anymore because I don't need things to be happy. The person with the most toys when they die does not win. I don't care about possessions. My parents are hoarders, so much useless that just ends up being in the way. I don't waste my stuff, but I don't cherish it either. If I lost everything I owned in a fire or flood, I would be irritated that I'd have to go shopping and replace things. I hate shopping. Beyond that, I don't cry over spilled milk. I wouldn't be sad or anxious. I don't care about travel. I don't have any desire to travel to see the world because I've seen it. I've gone to more countries than I can count. I've done cool things and had fun doing it. I have the memories. That's enough, and I don't hunger for more. I dislike extravagance. My aunt and uncle like to live a high life and impress others. I don't. I've seen the ugly side of that. I don't like to waste things, and extravagance always feels wrong and wasteful to me. I got sick. You know the saying, if you don't have your health you don't have anything. Well, I know from experience that it is true. In referring to being so sick you can't move, I'm pleasantly surprised I'm alive today. It really emphasized that the bullshit people stress over is bullshit. I don't feel the need to change the world. I tried to improve things while I was in university and make things better for people that followed. It was not appreciated. It made me realize that better is too subjective. I don't want to exert my will onto others. I don't want to leave my mark. I'm not going to be remembered after I die. Give me privacy over fame any day. If I was successful, I still wouldn't be remembered because nobody else is. My parents are multimillionaires, and within 10 years of their deaths nobody will remember them. Does their financial success make them more important today? I don't think so. TLDR, what happened is that I don't believe in work followed by consume. I'm not a hippie, but I did take the story of the Mexican fisherman to heart. I take joy in simple things, and I'm content being poor.